Yeah. Hey, Campside listeners. Welcome to Inside the Tent, our series where we go behind the mic of our hit podcasts. I'm Lane Rose, senior producer at Campside, and today we're going to talk with Liz Elkington and Stuart Bailey about Crimeless, Hillbilly Heist, the story of David Gant, a small-town security guard who, along with a band of hopeless accomplices, managed to pull off one of the largest bank heists in U.S. history. If you want more behind-the-scenes content from our shows and the people who made them, head to joincampside.com to become a free member of the Campside community. That's joincampside.com. Now, on to my conversation with Liz and Stewart. Liz, Stewart, thank you for joining me. I'm so excited to talk about Crimeless Hillbilly Heist. I would first like to know how you guys started working together.
We were hired to make a documentary series for, wait for it, at the time, CNN Plus. You can probably imagine how this story ends. And we were office mates, each of us producing a couple of episodes in the History of Comedy series. So the season that we were working on was the history of women in comedy. And Liz and I each had developed 2-hour-long narratives and all the people we were going to book for it. And it was a true doc piece, but it was with all the, trailblazers of comedy and how women really have become like the most, interesting and dominant force today and how that happened, right? Like historically. And we were about to start shooting interviews. We had outlined everything. We were office mates, and our office, for whatever reason, became the group hang. So we felt like cruise directors and social butterflies. And so, it was just really fun, and the way we had never met before. We had a mutual friend in common who hired us, and we found out at an impromptu Wednesday afternoon meeting at 2:30 that David Zaslav had killed CNN Plus. And I think I said something. Our showrunner came in and said, I said, "Are we not doing the update meeting?" And she said, "No." I said, "Oh, that was a heavy no. Is it for the bad reason?" And she said, "Yeah." And so we immediately started day drinking like mezcal at a bar in the sunshine and nursing our wounds. But we had such fun together that we knew we would ultimately actually work on something that made the light of day.
Good answer. Yeah, definitely. And actually, Stuart's background, you've got such a rich comedy background, and I had a doc background. So I think kind of it was such a happy meeting of the minds, but also in every way, shape or form. I feel like it was just we were a great team and a great hybrid. And it was Stuart actually that brought this story, this crazy, lurid, colourful story to me when I was producing something after that demise of our beloved show.
I will say Liz happens to be a very funny documentary and sort of like true crime producer. And I'm historically a comedy producer who's done a tiny bit of documentary. So we were a good team on this project because we both knew a little bit about the other side, but we really had kind of real strength in one particular area. But, some of the funniest lines on the whole thing are written by Liz. So it's like, don't let her comedy sneak up on you. It's right there.
I love that.
Bless you.
So, yeah, how did you find the story? What attracted you guys to it?
I had never heard of the story. There was a magazine called Mel, which was a magazine for women that I somehow got on an email list for. And one of the stories was, this is the wildest heist story ever, and it's about to celebrate its 25th year reunion from happening. And as I read about the details, each chapter as it developed, I felt like it couldn't get crazier, and it just did. Every turn, and all the characters I really related to because they were all people in their early 20s who had a crazy notion, and that editor that adults get that tells them, no, you don't want to do that. That would be crazy. That's insane. Why? I mean, what a crazy risk that you would be doing. That wasn't operating for them. So they just said, fuck it. Yeah, let's go. Let's do this. We can do this. And they all trusted each other, which is insane for thieves. And I shared it with Liz and I said, I don't know if we can make this, but this story is wild. Are you interested?
And I said, hell yeah. I mean, it's such a joy to have a story which, let's be honest, it's true crime, so we don't often get stories with such levity. And this one, literally, I think I was making a really dark show at the time about nefarious historical inventions like the guillotine and the scavenger's daughter, and Stuart brought this to me, and he literally put the biggest smile on my face, and I was like, how often is it that true crime has that kind of WTF sort of, well, it does have that a lot, but just the levity that this one had, and the likability of the characters, and the whole colourful tale, which you couldn't even write. So yeah, it was a slam dunk. As soon as the words came out of his mouth, I was just like, how do we do this?
I think David Gant is one of my favorite voices in podcasting history. He's like so fun to listen to, so funny.
You know who agrees with you is Johnny Knoxville. When we were recording with him, he said, I just can't help but root for this guy. And I said, same here. And the author, Jeff Diamond, who you hear in our story, that's his final words in the book that was written about this, is this guy, we just want good things to happen for him. And the nice thing is they have. It took a while, but he is happy. He has a traditional job. He's married. He has a daughter.
And you're right. Lane speaks correctly, because he literally talks poetically, doesn't he? When he speaks, he almost speaks, I don't know, he waxes lyrical, but it's almost like you couldn't write even the words he say. It's just like a beautiful script sometimes when you hear David speak, and you just can't help but smile. And he's cerebral. He's really, really smart. And I think weirdly, that's how they pulled this off for quite as long as they did. I think he had a lot to do with that.
There's a sweetness to him that is infectious. And we rented a house when we were interviewing everybody in North Carolina. And David stayed with us. He stayed in a room. We had a room for him, and he was up like at 5 a.m. and he said, I couldn't figure out the coffee maker and I didn't want to wake anyone up. I said, oh my God, you're the best. Let me show you how it works. And it was just like, we were roommates. We were buddies, like we were peers. And I just thought, I'm just so happy that we all came into each other's lives. And I am honored to tell your story. And there are others that we feel the same about, but he was the first one we booked. He was the actual thief, who pulled it off. And it all kind of starts with him and his desire for a better life, which is 1000% relatable.
That's awesome. What was it like to make this? Because I have a brief recollection of you guys booking like a physical space for everyone to be together, and I feel like that's very rare these days for podcasting. Is you don't always get to be in the same physical space as the subjects. So what was that like?
Yeah, I think that came a lot from my doc background making. I think it just made sense for us logistically to get that one central hub where we didn't need to kind of worry too much about spending the time that we wanted to speak to these people, like ferrying around and driving around, because some of them weren't located no longer in North Carolina. So that made the most sense, was bring them all to us, and then we get that glorious time back that we can actually sit and talk to them, as opposed to sort of driving across the country or doing it remotely. Because I feel like there's nothing better than being able to sit in front of someone IRL, as the kids say, but like in the real life, and actually have that connection, that human connection. And this is such a human story. It just made the most perfect sense to kind of have every last drop of that on, I was going to say screen, but on tape and hopefully screen. But yeah, I think there's nothing better to have that palpable energy in a room when you're sitting there talking to them. And you can get people really excited in a way that I think, that's not to say that that's not possible remotely, but it's definitely a different energy, isn't it? It's palpable and you can feel that. And I think that's what made the interviews so strong for us as well, and such a great experience. And listen, it was quiet. You could hear a pin drop. We were right by a beautiful lake, and that's about as magic as you get, because if you're recording in New York or in LA and you've got planes, trains and automobiles, then you're just like every 5 minutes it's like, oh, can you just say that again? And no, we could hear a pin drop in this. It was just an absolute privilege and a joy, honestly.
There's one weird thing. We flew in David Gant and Mike McKinney and another who no longer lived there. Mike McKinney was the would-be assassin in the story. If you're not caught up, he comes in a couple episodes, and also very, very sweet guy, really wanted to do a good job by us. And we felt like, God, that we feel the same about you. We ended up putting him in a hotel that was, spoiler alert, the exact same hotel that the FBI arrested him in. I mean, I don't know if it was the same room, but that would be crazy. But and we didn't mean to. I didn't know, where
I did.
he was. Oh, yeah,
I
Liz did.
did.
That's how we knew. That's how we knew. He didn't say anything about it. Obviously, there's tremendous potential for that to be triggering in a really awful way, but he didn't mention it. I picked him up from the airport and brought him to that hotel. I picked him up the next morning, and we did the story
No,
talking
I
to somebody.
definitely have to interrupt you. I definitely ran it by him because I'd never want to
Oh,
trigger
did you? Oh,
anyone.
good, good, good. I couldn't remember that part. It's been a
I
couple of
said to
years.
him, I said, how wild would it be for you if you were to go back to that hotel? And he went, actually, I think I'd quite like that.
Oh,
And
good.
so
That's
that's
right.
what happened.
That's
Yeah,
right.
I think that would be a little bit unethical of us to go, hey,
No, no, I thought it was just an accident. I couldn't remember it. But at one point, I was talking to someone, and I said, "I'm going to pick up our assassin from the airport." And someone said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, he kills people." I said, "No, no, no, he never killed anybody. He accepted $250,000 to kill someone, but that didn't happen." They said, "Okay, but he was on board with murder." And I said, "No, no, no, you don't understand. He's a great, great guy." And they said, "I think you don't understand." And I said, "No, no, no, he's fine." And he was so nice and fun to talk to. When the press announcement came out for this, he Facebook messaged me, "Oh, Johnny Knoxville's the narrator. That's great. I once pitched a series of stunts to him. I love him." They all think it's a kick to be a part of this. And for us, that's exactly what we wanted. We always want to have our subjects who trusted us feel good about it. And, honestly, for them to look forward to hearing a story they know so well is a thrill for us. I will tell you one highlight for me was Mike McKinney accepted $250,000 to kill someone because he said he at the time was a believer in the unholy Trinity, which, Lane, I know you know, but that is cocaine, hookers, and hot tubs. And for us, it was like, wait, hot tubs? And he says, "Oh, don't discount hot tubs. So important to that Trinity." And it's like, okay, okay. So later in the series, there was a line. There was the line that was, so he's in this hotel room that we were just mentioning, right? Was it the Hampton Inn or something like that?
it
But
was.
okay, so he's there in the actual original story, and right next to his room is the FBI. And he also can feel like we're all about to get busted. He can feel it in his bones. And he was actually reading a John Grisham crime novel at the time about a heist, I think, too, with a six pack. And so the voiceover line that Johnny wanted to change started by saying, "For Mike McKinney, long gone are the happy days of cocaine, hookers, and hot tubs. Hell, at this point, he'd even settle for," and then we needed to bring it back down to the harsh reality he was facing. And I can't remember who came up with what. I feel like it was a combination, but somehow we ended up with, hell, at this point, he would have settled for a hand job and a hot pocket. And oh my God, I could not get over how funny that was to me. And Johnny took like 10 takes to read it because he kept busting up. And just from a comedy standpoint, that is exactly where you want to be when someone can't read the line because they still think it's funny on take number 8. That's a home run, so it was just, and that was all because of Mike McKinney, like we're in this crazy place because of what he was into at the time.
Yeah, some beautiful synergy there with
Yeah.
Johnny laughing, Mike being like, "That's totally
Yeah.
so true and so funny." And I think that just speaks to like truth in comedy, honestly.
And they're all so likable, aren't they? They're so
Yeah.
likable as people. I think that's the thing that I really took away from this. I think that, we said to them, how do you feel about it now? Would you do it again? And they went, hell yeah, yeah, we would, because their lives were flatlining at the time. And I think it's just like for them, it was either that or kind of go into a spiral of depression. And this sort of was, I don't know, not that we're advocating this in any way, shape, or form, but it was their kind of, I don't know, it just added color to their lives, and it kind of took the flat line away, because otherwise they were like, what else are we living for? They needed that.
Good point. It's what are we risking? What we're doing isn't working. And David was gradually going into debt, and he was working like, what was it, like 15 hours a day, Liz, and a
Yeah, for
really
$8 an hour. Yeah.
hard job. And he and his wife were not able to make ends meet. So it was like, all right, the status quo is screwed. Why not roll the dice on this?
Yeah.
And he'd been in the Iraq War, David Gant had. He'd served his country. He fixed Apache helicopters in the Middle East. He comes back and there's really no, we say it in the podcast, but there's no job for fixing Apache helicopters in the US. So he got the job he could get, and it just wasn't good enough.
And it was the 90s, and obviously we kind of have fun with that as our backdrop because it was such a different time. Even though it doesn't feel that long ago, it's it's considered vintage now, and it's which is crazy to me. But it's just like it was the go-go 90s, and so yeah, it was that time where it was just that weird kind of like anything's possible type thing. I think that was just such a rich backdrop for them. I think back to the soundtrack of that, and it's like Alanis Morissette and Pink Fantasy, Mariah Carey, and like all that. And he literally drove the money to.
Are you not bringing up Spice Girls because it's too on the nose as a British person? Is that it?
I'll never not bring up Spice Girls. Come on.
Thank you. I was worried about you.
But yeah, no, it's just such a rich backdrop to, I think, when you're writing as well, to really immerse yourself in that world and get into their mindset as well and really get to understand them.
Yeah, I'm so excited for folks to hear it. I think it's so funny and fun and, it scratches all the itches I think that folks want to listen to these days. So
yeah, and there's some lovely characters, isn't there? Like even the characters you find only in small towns that really, bring that colour to life. Like we found a couple of neighbours who would watch the goings-ons in the different houses in the mansion that Michelle and Steve ended up buying 2 weeks after, or was it 3 weeks after they moved out of their trailer? That was suspicious.
Yeah, they went from a mobile home to a mansion within a month of the heist. So if everybody who saw Goodfellas remembers Robert De Niro taking this fur coat and diamond earrings off, one of the fellow thieves' wives, like, what are you doing? You don't spend the money, you don't show it. And that lesson, even though that movie came out 7 years before this heist, was lost on all these guys. And what's amazing about it is from the heist to the arrests, which were synced pretty much by the FBI. David Gant was technically arrested the day before, but nobody knew it because he was in Mexico. All of the other arrests basically all happened at the same time, so no one could tip anybody off. That's a 5-month period between those two events. That's a lot of crazy purchases, ill-advised investments, asking parents and grandparents to hold money for you, which is money laundering. Ultimately 20 or 21 people did time for this, for this one notion that really came about because two people were playing Uno and drinking Budweisers, and they saw a heist on TV and they thought, hell, we could do that, and that idea, through a lot of kind of cat and mouse and, pretend romances and everything else that was needed to get people to get on board, is that for us, that's the fun story. Is like, hey, what if we did this stupid thing? It's like, nah, that'd be crazy. So it's, I just love when people do lean into those notions. That story, to me, there's almost a fantasy about, what if you were reckless? What if you threw caution to the wind? This is one of those results, and for me, that's like, there's adrenaline just of like, I cannot believe they would do that. That's so crazy to me, and for me as a listener and as one of the people who put it together, like, I still felt that as we were telling the story, like, holy shit, I can't believe this is real.
We all do silly things when we're young, maybe not quite as gung-ho and silly and impulsive as these guys, but I think there's something really relatable about looking back on your younger self, which was really nice to have that reflection from them in interview as well, and just going, oh my God. But, I think their time definitely kind of made them, actually it got really, really emotional for Kelly when we interviewed her, and she was talking about her time away and, not being able to be with her kids. So there's always that kind of, ultimately, if you're talking about crime, we're so lucky to have the levity, but there's always that kind of nuance as well. Of course there is. Do you know what I mean? It's life, isn't it? It's messy. And actually, I just think I'm really grateful that they were trusting of us to tell that, because they've probably been lampooned so many times. Like they did in 2016, there was a film, Masterminds, that came out, and Owen Wilson was in it, Kristen Wiig was in it. It had an all-star cast, and it was a parody almost of this story, and a very slapstick one. And actually, much as we, appreciated it, it kind of missed the nuance that's in this story, the stuff that really, really, as a documentarian and storyteller, really draws you to it. There's so much kind of in between the slapstick moments. And that was, I think, a real privilege to get to know these people. And I think we can still say we consider them friends. They're wonderful humans that they've gone on a journey and, really come out the other side.
They were dreamers. I mean, for the most part, they did not want to hurt anybody. Mike McKinney ultimately, through an intermediary, wasn't able to pull off the assassination because David Gant was wearing a Pittsburgh Steelers jersey at the time. And that, for certain people, is representative of a blue collar working person. And I can't kill a person like that. So there are real feelings involved. There were obviously real stakes involved for everybody here, but we tell it with kind of a loving approach and we lean into the absurdity of it. But for them to trust us meant we're going to try to do justice by your actual story and not turn you into a caricature.
Yeah.
Totally.
You nailed it.
Yeah, I really stand by that. Yeah, thank you. I think that's so important. And I think that's something that we held at the start to the finish and beyond that, because just because your story finishes doesn't mean that everything goes back to normal, sort of thing. These are kind of friends and for life, I'd say. And the same even with the FBI. I think they did, the police work the FBI did on this was exceptional. And John Wydra, who was the FBI agent who was genius, I thought, in tackling sort of the money laundering.
And funny.
That's really funny.
How many funny FBI agents do you know? Like the list, it's John Wydra, end of list.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, he was really, really cautious. And he said, "You're not going to lampoon the FBI to me, are you?" And I said, "No, you did brilliant police work." And that's exactly, I think an audience gets to see the police work they did with all the colour that goes on in the background. There's nothing to take away from that. It's plain and simple to see. So, credit where credit's due.
Yeah. Everyone, the crime was great. The investigation was great. Johnny Knoxville was great. You guys are great.
I want to add Lane was great. I don't think enough. I don't know if you're putting yourself in this, but you should.
Big time.
No, thank you. Thanks again to Liz and Stewart and the rest of the Hillbilly Heist team, and thank you for listening to Inside the Tent. Don't forget to head over to joincampside.com to become a free member of the Campside community. That's joincampside.com. Thanks for listening.